back to another episode of DEC Does What. I'm Sean Mahar along with
Adriana Espinoza.
And today we are talking about something that many New Yorkers might not know about, and that is our oil and gas well plugging program. So Adriana, who do we have on the show today?
Sean, today we're joined by Nathan Graber and Grace Gallagher, chief and drone pilot for the Division of Mineral Resources.
Awesome. Nathan and Grace, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So first, many New Yorkers, I don't think, associate New York State with oil and gas drilling. So talk to us a little bit about the history of oil and gas drilling in the state. Like, where is it happening? How much is New York producing? And, like, how important are we to that overall energy picture here in the state?
Absolutely. So, like many other states, New York has a long history of oil and gas well drilling. So, in 1821, the first natural gas well was drilled in the entire U.S. in Fredonia, New York. And in 1860, the first oil well in the state was drilled. So a lot of wells were being drilled prior to the existence of DEC and the establishment of a modern regulatory framework in New York State. So a lot of these wells that were drilled in the late 1800s to early 1900s ended up being abandoned by the drillers and operators, and that has led to a lot of orphaned and abandoned wells. So abandoned wells are unplugged wells that have not been operated and maintained in accordance with prevailing statute and regulation that exists now. And many of these wells have fallen into advanced states of disrepair. And orphan wells are a subset of those abandoned wells for which no operator can be determined. So there's no responsible party to properly plug and address these wells. It's estimated that there may be up to 35,000 total orphaned wells in the state.
Wow.
But we're still looking for them. Because these are old legacy problems, we don't know exactly how many of these wells are out there and exactly where they exist.
So why is it an issue that you have an orphaned well? Like, if someone just goes and, like, turns it off and just walks away, what's the big deal?
Yeah, sure. Ultimately, these wells can pose a threat to the environment and to public safety. So essentially what these are holes down into the ground that go from the surface down to hydrocarbon-bearing zones that can be thousands of feet below the ground. That hole then creates a conduit that this either brine or oil or other contaminants can either make its way up to the surface and contaminate surface water or just the surface soils. Or it can provide a conduit for those same contaminants to impact shallow drinking water aquifers. Unfortunately, a lot of these wells are located in rural areas where our New Yorkers use residential water wells to supply their homes with the water that they need. So that becomes an issue. Also, in addition to just impacting surface waters or surfaces or groundwater, we know that they have the potential to emit greenhouse gases, methane specifically, to the atmosphere. Methane is a greenhouse gas. Like I said, that's 20 times more potent than CO2 over its lifetime. So that can contribute to global climate change. And these are emissions that really we don't need to be having out in the atmosphere. They're not serving any purpose. So ultimately what we'd like to do is plug these wells. And if we can get them plugged, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about plugging later on, then we basically render these wells neutral to the environment. But in order for us to plug them, like Grace said, we got to find them first, and that's not always as easy as we'd like.
You mentioned a second ago that these wells occur in a lot of rural communities where they often use wells for drinking water. How do you know if you live near one of these wells?
That's a great question. You don't always know, actually. Basically, if you're anywhere from central New York, so like think about like the Rome, kind of Utica area, west, you're going to get into well country in New York State. So where in the state that you are is going to depend what type of wells you're kind of getting impacted by. So if you go from, say, Syracuse up north to, say, like the Oswego area, you're going to have a lot of gas wells up in that area. If you go down south to the southern tier, you're going to hit more oil wells. And then as you go out west, further into Erie, you're going to get into oil wells and as well as gas wells. So depending on where you are, you're going to have different types of wells that you're kind of dealing with. But it is an issue, especially for property owners that we deal with oil and gas operators every year through our annual oil reporting season. And there's typically people who will buy a home and without realizing that there is a well on that property, and then all of a sudden before they even realize it. Now they're responsible for a well that they never knew about. So it can be an issue. But usually, if there's wells on your property, people tend to know. They tend to know it.
Yeah, like what do they look like? Are these like,
Yeah,
your typical, like they have a well casing that comes out of the ground? Are they flat, even with the earth? Like what are you talking about?
they can present themselves in all different types of manners. So it's most often I think we find these wells, especially oil wells. At one point, they were drilled in probably a farm field. The area was probably clear cut. They drilled say dozens of wells throughout on a hill slope. That was back in, say, like the late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe in the 1920s or whatever. And now those farm fields, that clear-cut area that was once just open pasture or open field is now a forest again. So that makes these wells difficult to find, unfortunately. But typically what we find in those situations, they don't always have a wellhead present. The wellhead could have been removed. So it's basically you'll just have a steel casing that comes up out of the ground. Usually that's about 8 to 12 inches in diameter. It'll come up anywhere from either flush with the ground to maybe up to your hip or lower. And then sometimes, in a lot of cases, especially if they were in agricultural fields, they could have been cut and buried, so there's no surface expression at all, and makes it really difficult to locate these wells. But that is fortunately where I think the drone tends to shine in this situation, that we can come out and fly that area and use a magnetometer that, even if you can't see the well on the ground, that magnetometer can still detect it below ground. And then we'll be able to find that with the data that's collected. So that's good.
built within the drone.
No, so that's actually, so what I use is, it's called a microfabricated atomic magnetometer. It's the
Science.
Mag Arrow by
Say that 3 times
Geometrics.
fast.
Yeah, I know, right? But basically, it's drone agnostic. So it's tethered to the drone, and as long as the drone is powerful enough to carry that magnetometer, it can be used with any drone platform.
So how big is this device?
It's about this long.
For viewers at home, he went
Yeah,
about the
it's about-
wingspan of
it's-
his arms, and he's about a
about 3 or 4
5'8"
feet.
tall
Yeah.
individual. So you do your
6 foot. I'm 6
foot.
foot.
Okay, sorry.
Just give me my full height. No, but yeah, no, it's about 3 feet long, probably about a foot wide. It weighs about 1 kilogram, so it's really light. It's made out of mostly carbon fiber. Microfabricated just means that it's really small, so it actually has 2 magnetometers and 2 separate orientations, so that it monitors the magnetic field in 2 different kind of axes. And like I said, once you kind of tether it to the drone, it hangs down below the drone by about 6 feet. And then that drone, basically, I handle the takeoff and the landing. Other than that, I pre-plan a flight mission, load it into the drone, pre-program it, and then tell it to go. And then hopefully it follows my instructions, which it doesn't always.
And how long have drones been part of our orphan well plugging work stream? Is that a new technology that we've added?
Yeah, actually, that is a new project that I started working on. Well, I really got involved with it in 2015. So when I first came to the DEC, we were trying to locate orphan wells by using the traditional kind of boots on the ground approach, where we would have central office staff go out to the regions and meet with our regional staff, both to kind of foster some teamwork and collaboration, because we don't often get to interact with our colleagues in the regions, but also just to try to provide some extra help out there to locate these wells, because like I said, they're not easy to find. And we had some mixed results with that. But the problem is, like we were saying before, is even if some of these wells, they're historical wells, right? And we use this historical documents to try to locate them, but those historical records aren't always as accurate as we'd like them to be. So we might have an indication that there's a well present in that area, but we don't know if that was a proposed well that was never drilled, in which case that well doesn't exist. It could have been a well that was drilled and plugged, and we just don't know it. It could be a well that was drilled, unplugged, and cut and buried, and there's no surface expression. So if we send people out to look for that, they can look all day, but they're not going to find anything. And then we don't know if that necessarily means that that's just because the well is not there, or if we just didn't find it. So by being able to come out with a drone, though, and fly that area, we either get a magnetic anomaly, which would indicate that there's a well present, even if we can't see it, or we don't. And if we don't get the magnetic anomaly, that's a pretty good indicator to me that the well's probably not on this location. And at least that way we can kind of cross off this property and say, hey, at least it's not here. We know that. It might be somewhere else, or it might not exist, but at least we know where it is.
Well, we are talking to Nathan Graber and Grace Gallagher from our Division of Mineral Resources on our orphaned and abandoned well plugging program. We're going to go more into the work and aspects of our drone work on finding these wells when we come back from a short break here.
Great news! In the enacted 2027 state budget, Governor Hochul increased the funding for DEC's abandoned oil and gas well plugging program to $5.5 million. This will help further enhance efforts to identify and reduce risks posed by fossil fuel emissions and leaks to the environment and public health. Know about an orphaned or abandoned well? Most importantly, don't touch it and stay back at least 35 feet. Take photos from a safe distance and record the GPS location if possible. Contact your regional DEC office or call 518-402-8056 to report the well to our experts. Learn more by visiting DEC's website and searching well plugging for maps of known wells and helpful resources.
Welcome back to DEC Does What? We're here talking orphaned and abandoned wells. And I wanted to follow up. You explained where in the state we see orphaned and abandoned wells. Does that also include downstate? And is it only rural and farmland, or what other types of geography out there for wells?
Absolutely. Orphaned oil and gas wells exist throughout the state, but they are primarily concentrated in western New York, where there is a history of oil and gas well drilling. So downstate, you are likely not going to see oil and gas wells orphaned there. And because most of these orphaned wells were drilled and abandoned prior to the existence of DEC, the exact locations of them are unknown, but our DEC regional inspectors are incredible, and they are routinely searching for and finding these wells in a variety of locations. They use old lease maps, historic well records, any that may exist, and tips from landowners to try to pin down where these wells are located.
Newspaper articles too sometimes.
That's right. Nathan has experience with that. And we're finding these wells in wetlands near heavily trafficked highways, inches away from buildings such as churches, schools, homes. But the wells are not always easy to find. Sometimes the wells are buried, lack any identifying features, or could be hidden in thick vegetation. So to date, DEC inspectors have located over 2,500 orphaned wells, and we continue to search for more.
That sounds like such an interesting job, to look through the archives and real estate documents to try to understand where these wells are. That's very cool.
Takes a lot of homework for sure.
Yeah, and we have some regional staff that are really, really good at it. I mean, they missed their call and they should have been detectives. They are very good. They're very thorough. So typically, like when I start looking at like a new county to go target orphan wells that I want to try to locate, the first thing I do is call the regional office that county is in and start picking their brain, and they usually have some pretty good tips.
Because our regions are awesome here
They
at
are,
DEC. All right, so Nathan, you do this historical search, you pinpoint, okay, maybe these 4 farm fields over here, a couple hundred acres may have a well or two on it. Let's throw up the drone. So you go there, you bring your drone, you've got the magnetometer on it. Is that sending back signals of the actual well casing and metal on it? Or what are you exactly looking for with this magnetometer, and how do you know it's a well?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, first off, before I even get out there, I've already talked to the landowner, right? So I've contacted the landowner. We've spoken about it. Usually that gives me an indication of whether I think there's going to be a well or not. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh yeah, I remember, Uncle Jimmy. The property's been in the family for generations, and he had a drilling company come out and did something." Or sometimes they, I just had one last month where they said there's absolutely no way there's a well on my property, and yet I found it. So, but yeah, so I come out with the drone, with the magnetometer. I've usually downloaded LiDAR DEMs on the area. I use that to program the mission. So basically when this drone flies, it's got to stay within a pretty tight elevation window. So I want to keep it usually between 100 and 135 feet above the ground level. And that doesn't give me too much clearance above trees in every case. So I get that mission planned. It gets loaded into the drone. Like I said before, I do the takeoff. I take off with the drone. The magnetometer hangs below it on a tether about 6 feet. So you can't really come straight down. You have to, when you're landing, you have to set the magnetometer down and then kind of yaw the drone out of the way and then land it. And then the same goes when you take off. Like you have to kind of come up nice and slow and gentle and then gently pull that magnetometer up off the ground. And then once I get it up to the altitude, I push the button and tell it to go. And that's, for me, the most stressful part, because all of a sudden I'm no longer controlling this drone. I've got to hope that the mission that I planned is perfect, and that there's not a tree out there that I didn't take into account, and just tell it to go. And hopefully it'll follow that flight plan. It doesn't always stay at the right altitude either, or the right speed. So it can be kind of nerve-wracking. But yeah, when that magnetometer is collecting data, unfortunately, I don't see it live. It's saved on the magnetometer. Magnetometer lands, I download that data, I bring it back to my lab, and then I have to process that into a magnetic anomaly map. And then those magnetic anomalies can kind of look like basically like a heat map almost. So you'll have basically a contour map of high to low magnetic values. And so basically what that magnetometer is doing is it's monitoring the Earth's background magnetic field as it moves through space. And anywhere where that magnetic field fluctuates, it's going to pick that up. So, and it's very sensitive. It's sensitive into picotesla sensitivity. So even at 135 feet, that well shows up pretty strong.
Cool. Hopefully we can put some maps up on the show notes here where you can see what it looks like and what you're seeing after you download the data.
Yeah, we have some.
So are you crisscrossing? Like, are you going back and forth? Or like, how do the flight plans work, and how do you aggregate that data together to give you that look?
Sure. Yeah. So typically the bigger the area, the more sort of flights that I'm going to have to do in order to cover the area. So usually if what I'm flying is it's a DJI M210, it flies for about 15 to 20 minutes with the magnetometer on there, depending on wind. So it's called the lawnmower pattern. So basically it just goes back and forth. I usually do about 20 meter spacing between each transect. It'll fly out to the area. You generally, in the literature, they say you mostly want to try to fly in a north-south pattern, just because that's generally how our magnetic field aligns itself. So it does help with your data that way. But I've kind of fudged that and gone in different orientations based on like the layout of a property or just based on line of sight. So based on the FAA rules and regulations, we want to be able to keep that drone in sight the whole time. The DC does have a code where we can kind of go beyond visual line of sight, but for me personally, I'd rather keep my eyes on that drone the whole time, especially with that magnetometer hanging 6 feet below.
I'd say.
Yeah, and when you're flying over trees, it like I said, it does get stressful. So I've actually got caught in trees before. So that's something I'd like to try to avoid doing again. So
Definitely.
yeah, but so that's the way it goes. So once you get that data, like I said, process it, and then you get a magnetic anomaly map, and then I'll either go back out and verify that there's a well there, or we don't find anything and we move on.
Fascinating. So hearing that there could be up to 35,000 wells across the state, we can't be everywhere at once. How do we prioritize the use of our resources?
So DEC has been plugging orphaned and abandoned wells for decades, and we have a variety of funding sources for this work, including seized financial security, DEC's oil and gas account, New York Works funding, and now even federal grant funding made available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But exactly like you said, plugging orphaned wells can be quite costly and resource intensive. And currently, there are still far more orphaned wells than we have resources to plug them. Because of this, DEC prioritizes orphaned wells for plugging based on each well's potential threat to the environment, public health, and public safety. So our overall goal there is we want to try to address the worst of the wells first. After orphaned wells are located, a DEC inspector completes a field inspection of the well and evaluates the condition of it. So we're looking at if the well is leaking gas, oil, or brine, the overall condition of the well equipment, so if it has a proper wellhead to control flow, or if it's just open casing. And we're also looking at the proximity of the well to sensitive areas such as wetlands, streams, habitat of endangered and threatened species, residences, and disadvantaged communities. So we give each orphaned well a quantitative score, and the higher scores generally represent the greatest potential threats. So from there, we create multi-well projects where DEC selects a high-scoring, high-priority well and then looks at other orphan wells in the surrounding area to create a geographically clustered group of wells that we can put forth as a well plugging project that balances both being impactful with also being efficient.
Great. Thankfully, in addition to the federal funding there, we got a boost earlier, proposed boost earlier this year. The governor, Kathy Hochul, included $5.5 million for plugging orphaned and abandoned wells as part of her State of the State speech. So that's exciting to be able to continue to plug more wells across the state.
Yeah, more resources, the better. So talk to us a little bit about what it's like to plug a well. So do you have just like a little cap you screw on and like walk away? Or I imagine there's more construction activity that goes on.
Yeah. So, like I said, with the way these wells are constructed, kind of dictates how we go about to try to plug them. So, usually they're concentric rings of steel casing. So we'll start with conductor casing, which is usually the widest casing, and that goes from the surface down to bedrock. Kind of holds the unconsolidated overburden open while they finish drilling the well. From there, usually then there's surface casing that goes from the surface, as the name implies, down to the deepest freshwater aquifer. And basically, the purpose of that casing is to try to seal those freshwater aquifers off from any of the hydrocarbons or anything that might come and migrate up from those hydrocarbon-bearing zones that they've targeted. And when we plug these wells, what we want to do is try to get down to total depth if we can, or at least the deepest attainable depth. And then from there, they will place cement plugs through every hydrocarbon-bearing zone that we know in that kind of geologic cross-section as we move up. So it'll be a cement plug kind of sealing off that formation, and then there'll be a bentonite gel spacer that goes in between each one of those plugs. And what that is usually they use this mineral called kaolinite, bentonite, and what that does is it absorbs water, so it basically swells up and creates an impermeable barrier that'll prevent fluid migration or gas migration from those formations through those cement plugs while they're trying to form up. And then once they're formed, if everything goes right, we should be left with basically an environmentally inert well. So it's basically sealed off. There's nothing that can come up out of it. And then usually what we'll do is we'll cut it off at what we call plow depth. So it's like 4 or 5 feet below grade. And then we regrade the surface area to match existing contours. And we usually reseed it with a seed mixture that's usually dictated by our landowners. So that once we leave, hopefully, it looks as if there was never a well there and we were never on your property.
Now, do we monitor these wells over time after we seal them?
Our DEC inspectors do return to the well sites over time to make sure that the reclamation is successful. But the goal is that eventually, once final reclamation is approved, we no longer need to go to those well sites, and the landowners are free to use their property without this old legacy problem on it.
Now, a question I've always had. I'm a landowner. I didn't know I had a well on my property. You come knocking on my door and say, hey, there may be a well here. You find the well. Do I have the option of then taking over that well myself and collecting that natural gas that comes out to, say, heat my home or anything like that? Is that a world of possibility that a landowner could do, or how do you really approach that with landowners?
If landowners own the mineral rights to their properties, or they have some other legal right to operate the wells, and they come to DEC and say, hey, I want to take this well on and be responsible for it, they do have that option to become an active oil and gas well operator. We don't necessarily recommend that because these wells are liabilities. They have potential threats to the environment, public health, and public safety, and the operation of these wells is regulated. So that's a big decision that a landowner would need to make.
So it sounds like there's a lot of variability site to site for plugging wells. Can you give us an example of a project that you worked on that was particularly interesting?
So in 2014, DEC used its first New York Works allotment to plug an orphaned well in the city of Rome in Oneida County. So the well was named the Stockless and Chiswick 1 well, and it was drilled and left abandoned prior to the existence of DEC. So DEC had received a lot of complaints about this well because it was leaking gas, and individuals would actually occasionally go to the well and light the gas on fire, creating a small flame, which is a big hazard.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And the well was also continuously leaking brine onto the ground, which killed vegetation across about an acre of land surrounding the well.
Wow.
The brine was discharging to Brandy Brook, which is a tributary of West Canada Creek. So this was a high priority for DEC to get plugged. So we hired a contractor who successfully plugged the well, stopping all leaks, and we are happy to report that the grass has since regrown and the site is fully reclaimed.
Success
DEC,
story.
signed, sealed, delivered.
Exactly.
And that's just one example, but in total, DEC has used state and federal funding to plug over 500 orphaned and abandoned wells throughout the state.
Well, this is great. We're going to take another quick break here and come back and learn a little bit more about the career paths of how you can get involved in our Division of Mineral Resources and our oil and gas well plugging program.
Want the latest news in air quality? Sign up for DEC Delivers to receive Airmail, DEC's monthly air quality newsletter, which includes information on air quality and other air-related issues in New York State. Sign up today by visiting dec.ny.gov and search DEC Delivers.
All right, coming out of the break, before we get into the career path of these two fine and wonderful individuals here today, I do have a question, though. What's the oldest well that you've found, either through using your drone or through the field work that we've done? Or what's the most interesting, unexpected thing that we found in the field when looking for these wells?
Sure, I can take that. So I think one of the most interesting wells that I found was on an island in Tioga County in the Susquehanna River. There was an old hotel basically that was built on this island, and I guess they drilled 2 wells to service that hotel with gas. The property now is derelict for years, but it was cool to be able to get out. It was the first flight that I did from a boat, so I got to fly the drone from a boat while we circled around the island, and then got on the island and looked for it, and we did find the wells there. And I think they were from I want to say the 1870s.
Wow.
I believe. So that was, I think, the coolest old well that I was able to find. Some odd things that I found while looking for orphan oil and gas wells. I think I was out in Steuben County, and I already talked to the landowner. They said it was an old property that nobody really lived on anymore. There's a trailer though, so I go with one of my colleagues that I work with. We stopped, and this was with the drone. This was just out trying to find a well. It was a snowy day. They stayed in the car, and I was like, all right, I don't think the well's going to be here, but we got to just cover our bases and just check. So I got out and I started walking past this old dilapidated trailer, and then went down this trail that went further and further down into this like kind of snowy area, and it opened up near a creek, and there was just dozens and dozens of dolls and doll heads hanging in the trees, just as far as I could see.
Feels very Blair Witch Project.
It was pretty spooky. I was alone. It was just weird, and I got a bad vibe, and I left.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, did you
What
find
do you
the well?"
think
Nope.
did that?
I have no idea, but I wasn't going to stick around and find out. So that's the weirdest thing that I've come across while trying to look for wells.
I will add to that during our orphan well
Grace put
plugging-
the doll heads there.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
It was Grace.
Yeah.
I promise it wasn't me. During our orphan well plugging projects, these are old wells, so when we get to the wells, we're trying to get to the total depth of it. The rig crew is, like Nathan described, but often these wells are filled with tons of junk, and I think that we've seen cannonballs,
Wow.
Christmas trees, stuffed down wells, lots of rocks, lots of metal shavings, but you name it, it's probably been found down an orphaned well.
Obviously not the preferred way to plug an
No.
abandoned well.
Something about an open hole, people like to just drop things down it. So
Yeah, see if it makes noise,
Yeah.
how far it goes. That's fascinating.
So I have a question. I'm someone that maybe doesn't want the government to show up and knock on my door.
Mhm.
So I don't think I'm alone. How do you handle homeowners or landowners who we're trying to engage with for the protection of public safety, public health, and the environment, how do we get them to engage with us if we come and knock on their door and say, "Hey, do you have a well?"
Yeah, that's a great question. If you have any good strategies on that, let me know. But yes, typically, I've always tried to employ the honey catches more flies than vinegar strategy. Persistence while not being pushy. Just I'll call, I'll talk to them. I like to just speak with them, answer their questions. Typically, if they're combative and they don't want to get on the property, there's usually a reason. Like there's something that's happened that they're upset over, and nobody's given them the time of day. So usually, just by listening to them, talking to them, answering their questions, I've had some pretty good success on getting people to go from like, nope, absolutely not, I don't even want to talk to you, to yeah, sure, when you coming out, and then calling me back and helping me try to find the well on their property. And that doesn't always happen. There's still times when they say no, and then that's their prerogative, and that's their property. So we're not going to push it. That's just where we draw the line, and there's a whole list of other wells for us to go after. So
Wow. DEC doing the work of protecting the environment and rebuilding trust in government,
Mhm.
one inspection at a time.
We're trying.
One abandoned well at a time. So, Grace, how did you get into this work, and what made you interested in wanting to focus your career on mineral resources here at the state?
I've always been passionate about science and interested in geology. I graduated from Binghamton University with a Bachelor of Science in Geology, and I ended up working as a logging geologist in the Appalachian Basin for about a year. And as a logging geologist, I evaluated rock samples and monitored gas flow during active well drilling throughout Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. But ultimately, I knew that I wanted to be involved in environmental conservation. So I took a civil service exam, and in 2016, I was hired in DEC's Division of Mineral Resources. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to serve the public through my role here at DEC.
Now, Nathan, did you go to school for drone operation, or did that come after you came to DEC?
No, yeah, that came after DEC. In fact, I almost didn't even go to college. So coming out of high school, I wasn't really sure if college was going to be the route for me, or if it was just kind of financially in the cards. And my senior year of high school, I ended up getting a athletic scholarship to go to St. Rose. So I ran track at the College of St. Rose, and I was always interested in landscapes and like how they evolve and change. I've always looked at the horizon and looked at mountains and hillsides and just been like, why are those there? Why do they look that way?
Thank you, glaciers.
Yeah,
and
right.
tides. Yeah.
And so I started studying earth science in undergrad, and I always liked science in general. I liked physics and chemistry and biology and mathematics, but I felt like geology was the one science that kind of took all of the sciences and brought them all together, and then tried to explain kind of what's going on this big blue ball that we live on. So that to me I found fascinating. It also came with the opportunity to be able to be outside a lot. My wife jokes that I'd live outside with the dog if she let me, because I just like to be outside all day. And geology afforded me that opportunity, so I was able to do some work in undergrad on a National Geographic grant and go to Peru and study the glaciers in Peru. And then that kind of got me recognized by a graduate program at Syracuse University, and I was able to go there and get my master's and study the frontal cordillera of the Mendoza of the Andes Mountains in the Mendoza province of Argentina for over a month, which was great. It led to my first publications, and then from there I started doing environmental consulting at a consulting company. Did that for about 4.5 years until I got sick of working 80 hours a week and being out of town all the time, and applied at the DEC and started working here. And then with the drones, it was just sort of something that kind of just started. So we were looking for orphaned and abandoned wells at the time with just boots on the ground approaches, where we would just look through the woods. And I just thought that there had to be a better way of doing it. And then right around that time, they started the UAS task force, and I got asked to be on it. And I said, absolutely, because I had already had an idea that I don't know how yet, but we should be able to use these to locate orphan wells. So, and then we kind of took off from there. And actually, I think I met you, Sean, at a speed networking event, which
Yes, you
really kicked
did.
this off. That was the first sort of
Great memory.
yeah, that was the first sort of momentum we got for the project was through there. So I
That's
appreciate
right.
it.
Because you came in and you were super excited and like passionate and
Yeah.
like, this is a great idea. Let's figure out how we marry all these things together with their growing drone program.
That's right.
And this need to really find these wells out in the environment. So kudos, 2,500 wells that are plugged now, thanks to the great work that you two are doing. You've made some incredible progress.
So
Thank
you help to identify a need that technology could fill to advance our work, and then we're trained on that skill within the agency.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't go to school to be a geomorphologist, so like I don't know geomorphology. It's pretty much I have a knack for learning things and being curious. So that's really like I've taught myself how to do magnetometry at this point, and that's how we've been able to get the project going.
Well, we're going to let you two get back to it because if I have my math correct here, you have 33,500 wells to go to find here. So still a lot of work in front of us, but you two and your teams behind you are doing a really great job. So thanks for coming on the show today and telling us a little bit more about our orphaned oil and gas well plugging program.
Thank you for your public service.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
Thank you, guys.
Well, Adriana, that was an awesome show. I can't wait to see these drones in action. But in the meantime, we have busy days ahead of us, so we've got to get back to work ourselves. So thanks for listening today. Please email us at contact@dec.ny.gov with more ideas on shows that you want to hear on DEC Does What. And please check out dec.ny.gov/podcast for more information on this show. But most importantly, Adriana, what should everyone do?
Get outdoors.
DEC Does What is a production of DEC's Division of Communication, Education, and Engagement. Our theme music is an original composition by Mike Menza, Environmental Program Specialist with DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. Like what you heard on this episode? Please leave a review and share this episode with others. Want to learn more about DEC's wide-ranging efforts to protect New Yorkers and the environment? Visit dec.ny.gov or connect with us on social media. You can find us using @NYSDEC. For more information on DEC Does What, visit dec.ny.gov/podcast.